ChatGPT is about to launch its public app store. It is news now that this is getting ready for the launch, and we are now bringing the most comprehensive overview on the internet as to how to build your app inside ChatGPT. Many people are rushing right now to develop apps to get them into the ChatGPT App Store because, as everyone knows, when these huge distribution opportunities open up, the earlier that you are, the bigger advantage that you have. The last time we had an opportunity like this was the App Store and the iPhone, and the big advantage there is that you suddenly have access to now billions of users that use the iPhone. What is now happening is the same with OpenAI and ChatGPT and generally LLMs. More and more people are using ChatGPT. Now that apps are there, they're going to stay there for the most of their use cases, and as that happens, they will have less and less reason to leave. What does that mean? It means people are going to start using the apps that are in ChatGPT. So if you are there, you have a huge distribution advantage. It's very important to be present. It's very important to think about what is your strategy with ChatGPT and getting your apps in the App Store, and that is why we have got this full comprehensive video as to how to build your first app. Anyone can, at the end of this video, build an app in ChatGPT, whether you are technical or non-technical, and we're going to cover the whole thing end to end today. So today I've got Vincent with me. He, over the last months with the team, has been building many different ChatGPT applications, both for clients and internally. And so very excited to be walking through this with him today. Vincent, what are we covering?
Yeah, we've been building a ton of apps inside ChatGPT. This was announced by Sam Altman during the Dev Day in October, and we've been playing around with it, see what it can do. And one thing we want to share with you today is that it's actually incredibly easy to build your first app in ChatGPT. And by the end of this video, our goal here is to have you actually build a little app inside your ChatGPT so you can understand how it works. So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk you through it from beginning to end, A to Z, and we will start with what are the tools we're going to use. How are we going to create the code? How are we going to actually instruct a coding assistant to help us create it and actually make it show up in ChatGPT? So we're going to show you how to set up and install Cursor. This is a very common app that a lot of developers are using, but increasingly less technical people because it is so intuitive and easy to use, and you have agents that live right inside the app. We're going to show you how we're going to prompt to create your first app. It's going to be one prompt, that's it. We're going to see the app right after that. And then we're going to show you how we can turn, a prompt in Cursor into something you can actually see in ChatGPT. So that connection. We'll be talking a little bit about some of the best practices. We're going to show you how you can put ChatGPT into dev mode, which is very important. Right now, the whole apps SDK, which is essentially the software that is used to create apps, is in something called preview. You cannot roll it out to actual users yet, but this is great for early adopters and curious people because you can get your hands dirty and start to discover what are the interesting use cases. And I think we've talked plenty about that and why it could be very interesting, and we're covering that in a whole bunch of other videos. And one thing we want to call out is that to do this today, you will need a ChatGPT Pro subscription, or you'll need to be an admin on a team, enterprise, or education subscription. So if you don't have that, you can still follow along and watch the video, but to actually get this to live inside your ChatGPT, you will need one of those subscriptions.
Yeah.
Elliot, I could also propose I take over the screen.
Yeah. I think one other thing to mention as well, and it was like Vincent said about things are in dev mode at the moment. We are still very early. So when we're building these applications at the moment, you are building them and they are only available to you and your team. You can get other people to use them if they're on pro plan, but they have to be in developer mode. So the reason they're doing that is because it means that basically they're not having these apps sort of like generally publicly available. There isn't things that we're expecting to happen like the ChatGPT general app store where you can just search and find any app. You don't have it yet where you do a prompt and then an app suddenly appears. There's a few of them like Canva and Spotify, etc. But other than that, it's early. But what they're trying to do is bring developers like us, developers like you, to build applications now and test. So that's why it's a great time to be testing. It is still early. There's going to be some bugs that we're going to run through, but yeah, that's why we're doing it now, so that as soon as this stuff is live, we can get it available and accessible to the public.
Thanks. So I think I've taken over the screen, and before we get our hands dirty, I want to just run through some of the resources and tools we're going to be using today. The two useful resources I want to call out is one, of course, the official docs. We'll have a link, but it's also easy to Google Apps SDK, and you're going to get all the latest documentation from OpenAI on how you can build an app in ChatGPT. And another extremely valuable resource is this GitHub. Quickly show this is an official GitHub published by OpenAI, so you can see here OpenAI.
You can only see one screen, Canva.
Okay, so it looks like I just need to share my whole window. But yeah, this is an official GitHub from OpenAI, and it has 4 different examples of apps, and some of them I think were even demoed during the demo day in October. So there is one with kind of like finding pizzerias near me. There's a to-do app in here. There's one that you can kind of like see the solar system. And the beauty of this is it gives you examples. You can then instruct a coding agent to learn from and study to build your own use case. So this is something that is invaluable when you're starting to prompt to create your own apps.
Yeah. And I mean, in short, what we're doing there is literally just you can give it that GitHub, and when you're prompting, it's going to take from those best practice examples, right? So basically does a lot of the work for you, which is cool. Just to quickly, maybe we open up the apps SDK. If we just open up that link quickly, I think one thing to show people is if you go on the apps SDK section just there, one thing that I would definitely recommend people do is check out each of the components here, because they tell you a lot about the way that OpenAI are thinking about these applications. So when they talk about, for example, things like researching the use case, they also allude to the fact, i.e., what are the kind of applications that are going to be good in ChatGPT, and what are the kind of applications that we're likely to promote, right? So that's super important. They own the ecosystem, they will promote certain apps more than others. So really good to understand. Like, we'll talk about good apps and bad apps in a second, but definitely review their documentation there. Also at the bottom, they've got another piece which is on metadata. So just below, they've got a little guide on it. Now, I'll link a separate video that we've spoken about this in a bit more, and we're going to do a specific video just on discoverability of applications. But this piece is super critical. Just like the App Store on the iPhone, when you search for an app, certain apps appear over others, and you need to optimize for that. The difference now with ChatGPT is you don't need someone to download your app first. They might just discover it directly via prompting, which is an amazing use case, right? You need to understand, how can I get my app to appear? And here they talk a lot about sort of the things that you need to do to get your app to appear, which effectively is, if you backwards engineer it, the things that they're saying they're going to look for when they are deciding which apps they want to show versus others. So yeah, just to reiterate, definitely check this out, and it's going to become, yeah, very important when you are trying to get your app found.
Yeah, and you can already start playing around with that now
Yeah,
when you start to build these apps.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Just a few tools we'll be using today. First is Cursor. So Cursor is one of the leading, you can call them development app in IDE, and it's a desktop app. Here, I'm on a Mac, so it says download for Mac, but it'll also have a Windows version. You just install the app, you open it. The beauty about Cursor, and I'll walk you through exactly how to get started in a moment, is that it has a whole bunch of coding agents integrated right into the app, so you don't need to bother with thinking about that. It's kind of like a very smart ChatGPT specifically built for development. We'll be using a coding language called Node. And your computer, if you've never developed before, won't have this pre-installed. This is something that if you haven't used Node and this is a new word for you, you'll likely need to install it on your computer. And this is something that's very simple to do. I recommend go to nodejs.org. And there you're going to have very clear documentation on how for your system, you can get started. I'll show you in a moment to make sure that once you have it, that we've verified it before we get started. Finally, we'll need a tool called ngrok. And ngrok is a very common developer tool. I'll talk a little bit more when we're using it, why we're using it. But to get started, just go ahead and go to ngrok, read the doc. get it installed, similar to Node, have it on your computer, and then you're going to be all set and you'll have everything you need to build an app in ChatGPT. A very short lecture, a 1 minute lecture on how does this work. I always believe that if you understand even just high level how it works, if you're going to run into an error you don't see in this video, you at least have the ability to try to understand why something may not be working, right? This is really the fastest way to solving errors you don't understand. So what apps in ChatGPT are is something called iframes that are served directly in the user interface. So if you, for instance, using the Canva example, if Canva has an app in ChatGPT, you would say, "Hey Canva, turn this content into a nice presentation." What is ChatGPT going to do? It's going to one recognize that you want to talk to Canva, which is a totally different application, right? It lives on canva.com. It has its own, infrastructure, website, everything. But it's going to the Canva infrastructure, and here it's going to use something called a MCP. This is essentially the 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 language or the way that a natural language model like ChatGPT can communicate to outside services. Think of it like an API, if you know what that means. It's essentially a way for them to talk. And then it's going to ask, hey, we want to build something on Canva. How should we do that? It's going to respond this MCP with something called a widget. And a widget is nothing more than a piece of user interface. But here it is especially designed so that it can show up inside ChatGPT. So it's going to say, well, maybe show this Canva widget, and then ChatGPT will understand it and show it back to you directly in the chat, and you're going to see that Canva widget. So it's a very simple, your user has some sort of intent, like Canva, do this. ChatGPT understands that intent, and this goes back to that metadata, right? It's able to understand, okay, we need to call Canva, calls something called an MCP, and this is what we're going to create today. This is the kind of the magic here, because this is also going to point to what the widget is. So it's not complex, but it's helpful to understand kind of the theory and the actual practicalities behind how this works. And the last thing you're going to need is an idea. There's quite some thinking coming on, like, oh, what are the types of experiences we're going to see inside user interfaces that are chat based, right? So you can imagine that something that is very much intent based, like, hey, I want to order a pizza. This is an official example from ChatGPT, right? Where you find pizzerias near you and you can quickly order a pizza. You don't need to go into another app, right? You don't need to switch context because we're getting very used to just talking to an agent with natural language. So try to think about something that is, and here are some good design principles that are time bound or action oriented when you have an intent. Canva is another good example, right? Because you have some content and then you have an intent to turn that into a presentation because you want to send it to a client. And try to also, on the flip side, think about, well, where might this be a poor use case, right? So long form or static content, like creating a newsletter, viewer or editor, something that requires a lot of finesse and a lot of features, right? Probably won't live very well inside a chat interface unless you can really make that simple and action oriented. There's, something that creates a lot of complexity, or also there's some security considerations, right? If there's a lot of private information, this will always live on ChatGPT. So try to think about some of the considerations you see here, but also think about your own use case, your own business. What are the actions you're doing every day? Would you like to see that inside ChatGPT? If yes, then it could be a good use case. What are we building today? We really thought about one of the simplest use cases. We're going to just create something called the Time MCP, and it's just going to show the live time. So we're going to ask ChatGPT, hey, show us the time, and we're going to show this card. This is not a very interesting use case, but we wanted to just keep it extremely simple so we can focus on the how, so that you can achieve your first app. And then you also have the knowledge and the ability to add your own use case, right? You have the building blocks. We're going to talk through more interesting use cases that we have built in other videos. We'll probably refer back to this video for some of the basics, because you may want to add a database, you may want to add authentication, you may want to add more interesting design. But then it's really good you've started with the absolute fundamental. So that's what we'll be covering today with a simple time app.
And we actually we toyed with this a lot, and we originally decided we were going to build a habit tracker, And Vincent's been playing with the habit tracker for a while, like debugging some things, putting authentication database too much for just getting started. So we're going to do that in a future video. But today, I mean, if you can build this Time MCP, you can basically build anything that has like a very simple UI that it can be generated automatically, and potentially even something that calls one simple API, for example, as well. So good place to get started.
Yeah, exactly. So the more complexity you add, the more opportunity you create for more errors and bugs. So another reason to start very simple is that you have something that is working well, and then you layer upon it step by step, right? You build confidence, you know how to build this. Okay, then the next step might be something where, you could add an email server and send the time to someone, right? And then you may have the foundation for a very cool use case, which is creating a little proposal, which is something we've built. We built a proposal generator, and then you already have all those components to get that done. But let's go ahead and get started. So you have Cursor installed. I'm using Cursor Pro. Well, I actually don't even know what it looks like if you're not using Pro, but it should look very similar. Uh, if you don't have Pro, it's $20 per month. And if you're going to be using, if you're interested in getting deeper into this, I do recommend it because you have access to the latest coding agents. And we're going to just click on Open Project. This will allow us to start a fresh project. This will open your file explorer. Not sure if that's sharing,
Yeah,
Elliot.
yeah, I can see
It
that.
does, yeah. And I'm just going to choose a place on my computer, and we're going to create one called simple. We'll call it my first GPT app, and just open. Great. So we are now in a fresh folder, a fresh directory, and you'll see on the top there are two modes, agents and editor. This is personal preference, but let's go ahead and click on the agents mode. It's a little bit simpler. It looks similar to GPT or a Claude UI. And the idea is that you essentially just tell the agent what you want to build, and it even abstracts away a lot of the code. You don't even have to look at it. Great. This is the future. You can see at the bottom there is two little selectors. This is agent, plan, ask. But the way you could think about this is ask, you are just getting an answer. It's a great way to learn. Plan is when you want the agent to create a detailed plan that you can review before execute. Agent is execute. Well, we want to be an execute. We're going to actually build an app. And the way that we're going to prompt this is we are first going to tell the agent what it should learn, what it should reference. If we go back to what we discussed just now, we would like it to learn from the official examples. That's the code that we know works. It's from OpenAI. It's official. So we're going to start with, we are going to build an app in ChatGPT. Look at this GitHub, it learn to build an app. I'm going to go ahead and grab the URL. I'm going to make the instructions quite explicit. Do not anything not found. This is example deviated from. You can word this any way you want, using just my own syntax and semantics here.
And then Vince, do you mind just pausing quick? I'm going to get my headphones 2 seconds. Hopefully, no echo.
Let's see. Do I hear myself without an echo? Yeah. It's odd, it just kind of changed halfway through the video.
Yeah. So I clicked mute, and then yeah.
Next thing we're going to add is essentially just give the high level requirement. We would like an app, the user can call it, and the UI will display a nice card with live. That's it. We're going to keep it extremely simple, obviously, and this is where you get creative, and this is where you can start to test and play around with your own use case. We're going to do one more thing, and I want to explain quickly the next part of the prompt so that you can understand it. The way that OpenAI, the official examples, have their code set up is that they have a server, which is essentially a little computer, which is what we're building now, called this MCP. But they've separated the widgets here, the little UI that it can serve, into also a separate server, a different little computer. This makes a lot of sense. If you're a professional, you're going to bring it to production because you could then use something called a CDN, which is just a bit of lingo for a way to get your content, to load a little bit faster. But we're not super concerned about speed and optimization. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify today. And I've created a little bit of text that we're just going to copy paste. All you need to know here is that this text is going to turn this into, instead of two servers, one server. This is just a way to make it even simpler. I'll put this somewhere accessible in a resource, or just copy it exactly. And we'll put this in the prompt as well. I always like to add this and create a README. This is kind of a document that is used in apps to explain how it works, kind of a start point. But I find them that agents usually overdo them. Just explain directly to me to run and set this, and you're done. So that's it. It's actually a very short prompt, a couple lines, one
Awesome.
little quirk to help us make it simpler, and we can go ahead and get started.
Mhm. And
One
with
thing to point out,
go.
yeah, go ahead, Elliot. I was just
Well,
going to mention that I'm going to use Composer One, which is, there's a whole bunch of coding agents here. Right now, we're speaking in November 2025. This is considered one of the leading ones. This is one that Cursor actually created themselves. Um, but I think you could use a couple here. You could use Gemini 3 Pro, which came out yesterday. I haven't played around with that yet. You could use GPT 5.1. All of these will do the job for something quite simple like this.
Yeah. And I think generally, like right now, everyone is talking a lot about Composer One, Gemini 3 as of yesterday. Very, very good for agentic tasks. I would recommend that. And then Vince, like, what would you say in terms of like advice on requirements here? So the assumption, right, is if you have something more specific in mind, the more specific you can be with your requirements, the better. And do you have any other tips just on generally like how to capture requirements and get them added in? Like, would you add them all into this prompt now? Would you create like a separate resource that outlines them? I know people use things like, product requirement docs and things like this.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're playing around, don't waste too much time on it. I find if you give an agent design discretion, it usually does a pretty good job. And you're usually quite impressed. Sometimes I even prompt, like this is what I want, right? Like I want to know the time, design an app for that, right? It could design something even cooler than you could have imagined. If you have precise requirements, put them in as detailed as you can. That way you're reducing the creative discretion of an agent, and you're going to see something closer to what you have in your head. So I could put, make the font size 72. Use this font, right? Add a light gradient. Make it X width, right? These are all things you could put in here, but we're not. We're going to just let the agent have creative discretion because we're interested in the functionality at this point. One final thing that's always good to add is to specify which coding language. As mentioned in the beginning, we want to use Node. Please build this in Node. There's a couple that the agent may choose from. In the official examples, there's also an example using Python. It's also a valid language, but we want to just stick to Node. It's a little bit simpler, and it's going to reduce a little bit of the setup, right? I think with this, we can just go ahead and get started. And the first thing the agent is going to do is it's going to go into the GitHub. It's going to learn. It's going to look at the examples. Then it's going to understand from our use case, what is it we're going to build. One thing that Composer does, which is very nice, it'll show a to-do list once it understands what it's going to do, and then it just executes. Now and then it may show a little, human in the loop intervention when it creates a directory or runs a command. So one just popped up, and this is fine, right? It wants to actually pull the code from the GitHub so that it can read all the code. With these kinds of things, you can just safely click run. A few more may pop up, and you just give it a minute. And if all goes well at the end, we should get some clear instructions on the next steps on how to set this up, creating the time app,
Yeah. And I think this to-do list is
showing
super
some
neat
code
because
on the right.
you can just watch it go through and to actually action out all of those different to-dos that I mentioned, and also check that the to-dos are what you wanted based on the prompt when you start to learn a little bit more about how these things work. One other piece that I think is important to mention, like this UI is relatively new. If you've used Cursor before, you might be used to the editor, but actually I personally way prefer it because it feels a little bit more like what you would have seen previously with, ChatGPT or, any other, chat agent. The reason it's good is because you can just set up these different agents on the left. So kind of like you had, like I said, in these other chatbots, and then these agents will work on the same code base. So you can actually do multiple different things at the same time, which is pretty neat.
Oh, it looks like it's done.
Nice.
Oh, here are the setup instructions. I'm gonna clean up. Looks like it opened the panel with a bunch of code. We don't even need to look at it. And it looks like we'll have a few steps to set it up. And before I go into that, it's useful to explain some of what we have just built is these two things. And one way to think about this is, we've written down some code on, Word document, but to make it useful, we're going to have to click save on that, right? You have then you can share it. So this is something you'll need to do every time you write code. And this is called building an app. The next thing we're going to have to do is figure out how we can get that app that you have now built into ChatGPT. And you, of course, are here, right? You're on a laptop, desktop, something that is actually like hardware. So you've downloaded Cursor, it's saved on your local hard drive. If me or you wanted to access your app right now, you're going to have to send me the file. Ideally, what we want is over the internet, I could directly talk to it. And then this is what ChatGPT needs. It needs to be able to talk to your app, but it cannot do that on your local computer. So the way that that's solved is something called a tunnel, and that's where ngrok comes in. They'll create something called a tunnel, will make your app accessible on the internet, then ChatGPT can talk to it. So we'll see in a moment how we do that, and it's going to solve that problem. And then after we have built it and ran it, two separate commands, and done this, we'll be ready to connect it to ChatGPT. But when you see something like this, instructions, and it starts with pnpm, this is a terminal command. I'll show you how it's done. Don't run away just yet. We're going to go to this toggle panel, and here it opens, like a new, it doesn't look like much, but this is a terminal. And you'll be able to see probably your home directory and then the name of the folder we're in. This is essentially a way to just talk to your app. We can run these commands right in the terminal. There's a nice little handy copy paste, put that in. You see it's getting to work. And that's one. We've installed dependencies. So this is just kind of before you get started, you'll need dependencies. Don't think too much about it. You shouldn't see any errors. If you do see an error, there is a chance that maybe something went wrong with your Node installation. So you should have set up Node. It should be working. And one way to always easily verify that is type in node-v for version f22.18. Make sure you see a number. That means Node is installed correctly on your machine. Make sure it's above 18. Below that, you may see errors as well because I think to run a ChatGPT app, you need above 18. Go to the next one. We're going to now build it. This is saving that document we've created. It's like everything went well there, no errors. Then we're going to go ahead and click the next one, start the server. We're going to make it available. This is essentially allowing anyone to now connect to our app. It's live, but it's still on our machine. So now we have a URL, localhost 8000. You could go there if you want. You're not going to see much. It will not be like a 404. It will load something. And then finally, we're going to use ngrok. We're going to do this in a new terminal. The reason is we don't want to touch this anymore. This is now a live server running on your computer. It needs to be ready, it needs to be on guard. So when anyone like inside ChatGPT is saying like, hey, what's the time? This server can listen to that request. So just go up here, just click that plus. You're going to get a new terminal. You get a handy little, another panel on the right so you can toggle between terminals. Be in that ngrok HTTP 8000. Make sure you've gone through the ngrok setup instructions on the website. It's just a few clicks. It may be a command, and then there we go. What we're interested in now is this forwarding. So this is a public URL anyone can go to now, and they'll be able to interact with your app. So that is what we're going to use for GPT to be able to see the widget. Well, looks like the next thing to do is to test it in ChatGPT, and we'll go ahead and already copy this thing here. So we have it handy. Keep that on your clipboard. And this needs to be edited up. Get out of dev mode again. Edit this up, and we will open ChatGPT. First thing, make sure you're on a personal plus account or you're an admin in a team, business, enterprise, or this is not going to work. Go into settings. First, we're going to turn on dev mode. You do that by going to apps and connectors, advanced settings, dev mode. And you're going to kind of see the UI in the back, the chat input, get this red outline, and it'll say, stay in that menu. You're going to be able to see this create connector. And on this MCP server URL, that's where we paste ngrok URL /MCP. This is the endpoint, the domain that GPT is able to talk. We're going to call it the Time MCP. No authentication is needed. You can add a description if you want. It's optional. Click accept and go ahead and click create. Okay. Let me take another minute and figure out this error before I. If it's again, then I'm burnt out. We'll do it tomorrow. Okay. Maybe it's something small. It'd be as simple that free ngrok URL needs to the user click on accept. This is the issue. The error with filters. Let's go ahead and try to prompt. Use MCP me the time. So it looks like there was a little bit of a display issue. Good to show this live because you could do a little bit of debugging. Oh, it looks like it tried to load a widget from our local host. Don't worry if you're now seeing things that you don't understand.
I don't think it shows the inspect
This is
for some reason. It's just showing the.
It doesn't show, yeah. So I am looking a little bit at the code. I don't know why that's not showing on my
Because you're just showing
screen.
sharing the ChatGPT.
What I will do is I will paste the bug, which this is a common one. This just means that the UI from the widget is not loading correctly into the server and getting this. And always good to go into ask mode when you're debugging, because otherwise Composer 1 or the agent will aggressively start making code changes, which is not always desirable. It looks like they understood that error and say, please make those changes. This is a common error going back to what we discussed with we want the widget server to be the same as the MCP server. This is not something that's unfortunately in the official code examples. Makes our life easier, but it means that the agent probably has to debug this one, maybe two times before it understands how to get this working. Some changes, base URL. So it's giving us a few instructions. We're going to have to set the base URL to ngrok URL in the start command when we built the app. Be lazy. Here is our ngrok. Give me the instruction again. But we're going to have to restart the server. Right now it's running. Go ahead and do Control C or Command C. Exit it. I'm going to do these new instructions, and then this is still running. We don't need to restart ngrok. Give it another go. Whenever you update a server on your side, you unfortunately need to always delete and re-add a connector. Takes a few clicks. Do the exact same process. No authentication. So there is the widget. It's not the prettiest, but we had to do one round of debugging. It may be maybe an error you get as well. It's a common one. I've ran into it a few times. It has this weird flash, which we don't want.
Yeah.
It doesn't take the full width. So you can kind of see there's a lot of room to improve on design.
Yeah.
It loaded.
But
it's
so
live.
this is awesome. That's like within like less than 10 minutes, you're able to take it from prompt all the way to getting it set up on a server, loaded into ChatGPT, and directly working whenever you want to make it to have whenever you put a prompt in for it. So that is awesome. And like I said, this could be anything, right? Obviously, the more complex the app is, the longer it's going to take to develop, etc. This is a very simple use case. You're going to want to do some refinement, even if whatever simple use case you choose, because like you said, you've got some flashing, you might want to make it look different. You can reprompt within Cursor to try and make those updates, but it shows you end to end, right? How if for something really simple, you can get started quickly. And yeah, I think this is a really good example of that. One thing to call out is that you'll notice when calling this application to come in, the prompt here specifically says using the Time MCP. Now that's important because sometimes we're predicting when ChatGPT actually has this live, you'll be able to do a prompt like this, what is the time? And then because it knows that you've used the app before, it will then show you the time exactly like Vincent has just shown. However, when you're first getting to use the apps, we're seeing that actually you need to mention them specifically. So there's a lot of testing that needs to be done here. And actually, it'd be interesting to see if it shows here as well when you ask it in a new window.
Looks like it will.
It looks like it will.
I think it does learn across chats.
Which is also interesting, right? We're learning live how this stuff is going to work. So you can see here that, by the way, is a great thing. You know, if you've used an app once, you've got it in there, and it will start to recognize when it's needed. It will start to make those apps appear. So just to call out, this is one of the biggest things you're going to be wanting to test within developer mode as well.
Yeah, so hopefully this gets you started on your apps in ChatGPT curiosity journey use cases. It is in preview mode. We're noticing the tech updates all the time. Team is shipping features and they don't always work. So there will also be potentially bugs, errors as you get more complex that you don't understand because this tech is brand new. It's hot. You can kind of like, yeah, don't touch it too long, you'll burn yourself. So it's good to start small. You can see we already ran into a little error. I think that that's good to show because you will need to debug. But I found that if you go deep and you really understand how it works, and that's also why we tried to explain the fundamentals behind it, it is possible to get what you want working. And really, the sky's the limit, right? Anything you can dream of, you could build in a ChatGPT app.
Yeah. Totally. And I think it was a great overview. We have a community as well, which is specifically focused on helping people build apps in ChatGPT. So I will drop it in the comments. We cover a lot of this stuff. So if people have technical questions, lots of people talking about different use cases, how to get discovered, things like this. If you have any questions in general, do just drop them in the comments. And this was aimed at being a very beginner friendly demo, but we developed far more sophisticated applications, including proposal generations, habit trackers, lots of tooling also around how to improve AEO. So we will share those in future videos and do a more advanced session. But for now, I think that's everything. So thank you for watching.